Of the 5 things that the Mishnah in Ta'anit lists as being the reason for the establishment of the day of Tish'a BeAb, the destruction, of course, of the Beit HaMikdash features prominently and is listed as 2. But the ultimate source, it would appear, and surprisingly, is the Chet HaMeraglim, the story and the transgression of the spies. And so much so that there's a statement that the Gemara makes, which deserves some interpretation, which maybe we'll do, but I just want to use it just to show you the centrality of the episode of the spies to this day, which is, the Gemara says, that when the spies came back from Israel and gave their report, so that the Pasuk says that they all cried that night. They cried that night. So the Gemara says, Heim bachu b'chiyah shel chinam. They cried a cry for nothing. B'chiyah shel chinam, a cry for nothing. Va'ani ekva lahem b'chiyah l'dorat. And I will, God says, designate a cry, a real cry, that will be for all generations. And that, of course, is that the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash took place on the very same day, night, as the story of the Meraglim. What exactly that kind of statement is, like I said, that they cried a cry for nothing, so now it sounds like a parent saying, I'll give you something to cry about. But, of course, to say that about Hashem would not be appropriate. I'm not saying it's appropriate by parents either. So, but nevertheless, you do see that the first murmurings of that this day will become a day in Jewish history first trace itself back to the time of the Meraglim. And I guess as a basic question, I'd like to understand the relationship between the Chet of the Meraglim and Tish'a BeAb, and what that has anything to, if anything, to do with us. Now, in specific, the story of the Meraglim presents many challenges, many challenges, and I don't claim to that I'm going to try to answer all the problems associated with the story. And it appears, by the way, in 2 places in the Torah, one in Shlach Lecha Anashim, where the actual event took place, and then you have a recount by Moshe Rabbeinu, which we actually read yesterday, where Moshe Rabbeinu gives a quick synopsis, which of course is interesting to see what elements Moshe Rabbeinu keeps and which ones he doesn't, when he recounts the story to Am Yisrael. But the story does present challenges, and let me just give you a few of them. And if you have any of your own that you'd like to add, feel free. I'm not saying I'll answer them, but certainly would be interested in hearing what other issues there might be. You have, as one problem is, a very basic problem, big problem. It says, and Moshe sent them from the desert of Paran on the word of God, all of them men, kulam anashim, all of them men, Rashi b'nei Yisrael hema, heads of the Jewish people they are. So these are not 12 anybody's. These are 12 of the most important people, each one representing a tribe. These are top-notch individuals, selected by Moshe in agreement from Hashem. So Rashi says on the spot, Kulam an Hashem, they were all men. This is a language of importance, chashivut. Va'oto sha'a kisherim hayu. And at that hour, they were all kosher. They were all, we just said, not only kosher, but the finest of people, the representatives of each tribe. That's what Rashi says. And yet, the very next Rashi, you don't have to go too far here, it says, Vayikra Moshe laHoshea Yehoshua, and Moshe changed Hoshea ben Nun's name to Yehoshua. So why did he do that? So Rashi says right on the spot, Nitpalel alav, he prayed for Yoshua. Ka Yoshiacha, Hashem should save you, me'atzat meraglim, from the whole plan of the meraglim. You just told me a minute ago that these are kisherim. And the very next words are that Moshe, before he sends Yoshua, this is not happening later. This is before he's sending him. He's already praying for him that he shouldn't get sucked in, as it were, into the whole plan of the meraglim. Funny kind of kisherim that they are. And then later, Rashi, and these are all based, by the way, many of these Rashis are based on a couple of pages of Gemara in Masechet Sotah, on Lamed Daled, Lamed Hey. So Rashi says a little bit later, give me a second here. Here it is. After they spied out the land for 40 days, it says, Vayelchu vayavo el Moshe ve'el Aaron. And they went and they came to Moshe and Aaron. So Rashi quotes the Gemara. What is this Vayelchu vayavo? They went and they came. One of those verbs would have been sufficient. Lahakish halichatan lebiyatan. To show you a parallel between their leaving, their walking, and their coming back. Ma biatan be'etza ra'ah. Just like when they came back, they had a bad counsel, a bad plan. Af halichatan be'etza ra'ah. You should know when they were going, they also had this etza ra'ah. They already had this bad plan. So it's very strange. So what does Rashi mean, and what does the Gemara mean when it says they were all kisherim, that they were kosher? Some kosher group of guys. They're kosher with one of the worst plans ever in Jewish history. Changed the whole Jewish destiny. So that's something I think that really needs to be understood. What does it mean that they were ksherim, they were kosher, and yet somehow they had this plan already in mind? Moreover, let's accept for the moment that they were ksherim, that they were kosher. I think it's very fair to ask, what went wrong? How did these 12 great men end up doing what they did? I mean, we're not little kids anymore. Life isn't just black and white. So we'd like to know. We'd like to understand. What was the evolution here? How do you go from being a certain top-notch individual, a representative of your tribe, into going down in Jewish history as a rasha, as an evil person? What happened here? What went wrong? And by the way, if I could, I'll just add, but it's interesting that Moshe prayed for Yehoshua, that he shouldn't get ensnared in the plot. But it's interesting, of course, we have another guy who remains good in the plan, and that's Kalev. What does Kalev do? So there's another famous midrash, and that is, it says they came out of the Negev, Vayavo ad Chevron. Vayavo ad Chevron. So it uses the singular. Now you could say it's referring to all 12 spies as a unit. There's nothing grammatically wrong with that. It's certainly fine. But the Gemara keys in on the fact that the Torah switched to the singular in this case, and it says, and Vayavo, and he came, or one came to Chevron. So Rashi quotes the Chazal, the Chachamim, Kalev levado. it was only Kalev who came to Hebron. V'nishtateach al kivrei avot. He went and he visited the graves of the avot. The graves, they were in Hebron. Shelo yehi nisat l'chaveirav liyot batzatam. That he shouldn't get dragged in to the plan of his friends and their counsel. So interesting. So you see, Kalev on his own is worried about himself. He didn't get the good fortune of having Moshe rename him, pray for him, etc. But on his own, he went ahead and went to Hebron for the purpose of hanging out by the Kivrei Avot to somehow avoid getting involved in the council. So I'd like to know, here we go. Again, it shows you, even a person like Kalev was worried. He had his concerns. And he had to do something proactively to ensure that he would not somehow fall prey to the whole thing, it would seem. And he went to the Kivrei Avot. What the purpose of that was exactly? Rashi doesn't tell us. But somehow he thought that this would be a good antidote. So keep that in mind. Hopefully we will solve that when we try to understand the dynamics of this whole chet, this whole transgression of what occurred here. And finally, there is a statement by the Gemara, not in Bavli, not the Babylonian Gemara, but Yerushalmi. I came across it last week. Year after year, when you have Tish'a BeAb, you're always looking for fresh material. So you know very few people ever look at Yerushalmi. You know, Bavli, they might have seen it, somebody might have quoted it in some book or something, but Yerushalmi, you're usually more safe. So the Yerushalmi says, based on the pasuk in Eicha that we read yesterday and this morning, last night I should say, Bacho tivkeh balayla. Cry, you shall cry at night. So the Gemara says, Bacho tivkeh, cry, you shall cry. There are two cries. What are the two cries? One is the cry, of course, that I mentioned before. The fact that after the report of the spies, when they came back, Am Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael cried in their tents when they went home that night. They cried. What's the other cry? The other cry is that when Moshe Rabbeinu told them that there were more relationships that would not be permitted once they became fully Jews, that is, the difference in sexual relations between a non-Jew and a Jew is a Jew has 6 more relationships that we are prohibited from having, from marrying, from having such type of human relations. So when Moshe Rabbeinu told them that, and included even members of their own family, because that was permitted prior, so they went back to their tents and they all cried. Bochel mishpachotav. They cried unto their families, and the Gemara there says they cried about their families. That they wouldn't have the same kind of close families that they had in the past. Okay, that probably deserves its own explanation, but I just want to know one thing. What does this have to do with Tish'a BeAb? Bachot tifkeh balayla. Yirmiyahu is stating in Megillat Eicha that you're going to cry at night. It's talking about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash that he witnessed. And it's telling you that about 2 cries you'll cry. What are the 2 cries? Okay, one's about the Meraglim. Okay, I get it. I mean, Meraglim is somehow tied very closely to this whole business of Tish'a BeAb. But what does the fact that they were prohibited in other relationships, sexual relationships, that's another story. What's it got to do with Tish'a BeAb? So I'd like to at least, hopefully, by the time we're done, have some insight what the relationship is between those 2 cries and Tish'a BeAb. So I guess the By the way, are there any questions? Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Yes.
Seems like so Moshe knew what was going on. He had some inkling. So yeah, they're called Kesherim, but he knew something was up.
Yes.
He debriefed Yeshua about it. Kalev came up, up to on his own. He did his own protection thing. Why didn't anyone debrief the rest of the spies? I mean, why? It seems like it's almost like putting a stumbling block before them. It's like passively not, Why don't they say, you're going to go, you might see things, come back, and think it with an open mind, or something like that?
Good question. Good question. I hope that we'll be able to answer that question. Very good question. Yeah. By the way, I'm not taking up now, but I think it's something interesting, but it doesn't have to be today, is how did, in fact, Moshe Rabbeinu know about the plot? How does exactly know about it? All right, well, if we have time, maybe we can take a look at that. But it's not my main focus. I want to really understand the dynamics of the problem first, even though there are other interesting things that are related to this episode. Okay. Yeah, do you want?
It's not really directly connected to what you're talking about. Bad spies, but not bad this problem spy.
Go ahead.
With that introduction,
Something's never changed.
Seems from I don't know, 2 different stories that it was Moshe's idea, and then he got mad at them that you got me to send them. So why is he getting mad at them if he was the one that ultimately chose them to send?
okay. All right. That's also a good important question to answer. Absolutely. Okay, good. All right. This one. Let me make it clear, as I start to develop the approach to these problems, I'm only looking to understand this episode through the eyes of Rashi. If you take a look at the Ramban, he has a very different explanation. Usually most people, including myself, usually present the Ramban because he gives you everything, he lays it out, and he develops it, and it's just a lot easier to figure out how the story unfolds if you use it through the eyes of the Ramban. But but this year I'd like to really take it through the eyes of Rashi, and I think as a result, important things hopefully will emerge. So in yesterday's Torah reading, right at the very beginning, so Moshe Rabbeinu, in the beginning of, well, we all know, Sefer Devarim, of course, is a rebuke. It's Musar. It's Moshe's last month alive. And as I mentioned yesterday at the early minyan at Larchwood, I said most people wouldn't do what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Because usually if you're in that last days of your life, and either you're talking to your students, or you're talking to your family, or to your children, it's not a time to rebuke them because you want them to remember you in a good way. So usually you say really nice things at the very end of your life. But Moshe Rabbeinu, because he knows it's the last month of his life and knows that as a result nobody can impugn upon him any ulterior motives, because he's going to be dead in 30 days, he knows this is the perfect time to give them musar, to give them rebuke, because not one of them will do what we often do when we get rebuked, which is, you wonder what's in it for the guy who's rebuking me. Like maybe he's telling me to do this because it serves him some benefit, some purpose. Right? My parents tell me to clean up the room. It's very important to clean up the room. Yeah, well, there's some ulterior motive, I kind of guess. They like to see that clean room. See? But here Moshe Rabbeinu realized that to give rebuke at the last moments of life will be the best time for them to accept it. So even though it might result in their having certain less than kind feelings about him, but all he's interested is in them. That's what he's interested in. He's interested in Am Yisrael moving forward in the best possible manner. And if they remember him a little bit, oh, he's the guy that, always gave us this little smack, all right, so be it. Moshe Rabbeinu is willing to take that, they take that risk, that's fine. Because it's worth it, because the upside is just so much greater. So it's a very interesting thing that Moshe Rabbeinu does this and the way he does it. But there's a lot to say about the way he rebuked. But in any case, he says, right at the beginning, Re'eh natati lifnechem et haaretz, bo'u urishu et haaretz, asher nishba Hashem la'avotechem, la'Avraham, li'Yitzchak, li'Yaakov, latet lahem u'lazaram acharehem. So he says to them, see, behold, I have given you this land, go and inherit it. The land that Hashem promised Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov to give to them and to their children, their offspring, forever. When does this take place? When is this statement? I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, making it in the last month of his life, but what's he recounting? A statement that was made soon after the event of Har Sinai. In other words, it's within that, a few months after Yetziat Mitzrayim. And he's telling Bnei Yisrael, go and just inherit the land. So what does Rashi say? I told you, I want to look it through the eyes of Rashi. Rashi says something, wow. He says like this, Bo Rishu, Ein Ma'arer Badavar. Nobody will complain. Who does it mean nobody will complain? He means the 7 nations that inherit the land, that are presently dwelling in the land. Ve'einchem tzrichem lamilchama. You will not need any war. No war. Ilu lo shalchu meraglim. If you would have sent the spies, lo ayu tzrichem leklei zayin. You would not have required any weapons. That's pretty unbelievable. So according to Rashi, Rashi learns that when Hashem said to Moshe to tell the Am, Bo Rishu, go and conquer the land, which, by the way, was exactly what Moshe told his father-in-law. When Yitro came to visit, he wanted to leave, and Moshe said to him, Nosim anachnu. Don't go anywhere. We're about to travel. We're 3 days away from Eretz Yisrael. Nosim anachnu. That meant, according to Rashi, they're going to literally walk into the land. And somehow they're going to walk into the land, and everybody else is going to leave. That's it. That's the Yad Hashem. That's the way the Hashgacha will play out. That's what it says. I can't change the words of Rashi. He says it openly. There's nothing to say about it. That's what it is. So, I think that, and I suspect, and if it's not you, so I'll go ahead and just blame myself, that what I'm feeling or felt when I first read this Rashi is exactly what the Meraglim, these 12 great men, felt as well. And I would say they probably felt it on a more profound level because of their greatness. And what did they feel? They felt, this is impossible. Not possible. Not possible. That Hashem's chesed will extend, that he's going to do this for us. We're not going to fight a war. This whole thing is going to just simply play out completely miraculously. No weapons needed, no battles fought, nobody risking their life. Not possible. It cannot be. It cannot be that such a thing should ever happen to us. We're not deserving of such a thing. It doesn't make sense that God's kindness would extend to us in such a manner. We'll fight. Yes, God will help us, of course. But that we will just simply walk into the land and it'll just become magically ours? It's simply not possible. That's what I think they maintained. They were kisherim. They were kosher. They had, based on their knowledge and their learning and whatever, experiences they had, they maintained that the Chesed Hashem cannot extend this far. It just cannot be. It's too much. It's simply too much. That was their view. So the inception, the earliest thinking about the command of Moshe Rabbeinu to go, Nosim Anachnu, we're going to travel, Bo Reshu, we're going to go ahead and go in and enter and inherit the land, simply threw them. They were in a state of, they cannot accept this. It cannot be. So what is the beginnings of their chet? If we had to categorize it, define it, it's a misreading of the Hashkachat Hashem. They misread the Hashkachat Hashem. And I'm telling you, look, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I'll speak for me. I would imagine I think I'd be as incredulous as they would be. And again, I'm not as learned as them. But on my little limited knowledge, I'd be shocked. I'd say, something's wrong here. Can't be. Moshe Rabbeinu, are you the one that taught us the whole idea? Don't we have a big idea in Judaism? Ein somchin ala nes. We don't rely on miracles. Right? We have to do ours. And if we act in a certain proper way, according to our wisdom, then the hashkacha, meets us, and it's an intertwined, reality. We're doing our thing, living according to a certain way, according to the way you taught us, and now Hashem help. But we're just going to walk in against 7 nations, and God is just going to take care of everything. Poof, it's all going to disappear. The whole problem. We're going to be in there. In a couple of days, we'll take over the whole land of Israel. Never fight a fight. Never have to worry about one strategy. Wow. Can't be. They couldn't accept it. They simply couldn't accept it. You want?
Yeah. Is it that they didn't think they were worthy of that amount of vessel? Or is it that they didn't believe that it could be done?
I think the first one.
So they didn't think they were worthy of it.
Yes. I think it was due to a certain level of their arivut, their humility. They could not believe that God would ever do this for a human being, let alone a nation. It's too much to believe. I think that's what it is. And that fits into the idea, because ksherim ayu, right? They all say that they were kosher. Okay, so their initial reactions and thoughts are coming from people who are considered, and after all, these are the people who were selected by Moshe Rabbeinu himself. I think Rashi says somewhere, I don't remember now about Midbar or in Dvarim, he says they were hamisultin v'hamivurarim, like the most sifted, like sifted flour, like the best. They were the cream of the crop, these guys. So I think, yes, I think it's the first possibility. They simply they thought that the hashkacha, that God's providence would never relate to people like them like that. It can't be.
Because they figured that they need to do their part.
Yes.
Something.
Absolutely. So now that brings us exactly to the next step. The next step is that it must be that we're going to have to fight. That's their conclusion. It has to be that we have to fight. Right? And we're not accepting that God's giving to us on a silver platter. We can't accept that. So what's the alternative? The alternative is what we think. The alternative is that we're going to get armed, and we're going to have to go in there and fight a fight against these 7 nations. That's what we're going to have to do. Well, guess what? Why do you think Hashem told Moshe, Bo'u urishu? Let's go back. Let's understand the truth of the matter. Okay, they didn't want to accept it. But the truth of the matter is, Hashem really did tell Moshe, according to Rashi, Bo Rishu, go without, you're not going to need weapons, you're going to go in, there's no war, don't worry about it. Okay? I mean, you can wear a weapon, but you're not going to have to use it. Okay? You'll go in and you'll conquer. So what was the thinking? What was Hashem's thinking? What was Moshe's thinking? The answer is, the reason why Hashem was presenting Eretz Yisrael on a silver platter was because he was saving them from themselves. They can't fight, in fact. They just came out of Mitzrayim. They just came out of 210 years of slavery. They're not guys who could fight. They're not up to going ahead and fighting a prolonged war against 7 nations. 7 nations they're not going to do. They're simply be scared out of their minds to do have such a engagement. Couldn't do it. So it's not, see, that is, of course, the Chesed Hashem. The Chesed Hashem isn't just simply, here, let's give them a silver platter, they don't have to fight because, that's the way things should be. No. That Chesed Hashem was necessary in order to take in this group of people at this time. You want to take this group of people, whatever, a month, 2 months after Yetziat Mitzrayim, there's only one way to do it. It's this way. So that was the Chesed Hashem. The Chesed Hashem was recognizing their personalities, understanding their limits, their tremendous limits. They're slaves. They're still existing with a slave mentality. They're frightened when Paro sends, 600 men on chariots. They're a nation of a few million are frightened to death, right? Remember? Az Yashir? So therefore, Kal Vachomer, they're going to go in and try to conquer, throw people out of their land. You know how tenaciously people will fight to hold on to their land? We think it's going to lay down their gut. It's not going to happen. So the Chesed Hashem was, it will happen. And you don't have to worry about it. So now, let's go back again. So they don't want to accept that, right? They're not accepting that. They're misreading the whole hashgacha. They cannot believe that that's the hashgacha. So what's now in their minds? In fact, we're going to have to fight. That's what's going on in their minds. We're going to have to fight.
But it'll be an easy fight.
No, they don't believe it. So for them, there's only one conclusion at this moment. We have to fight, and that is the scariest proposition we've ever heard.
Was this mentioned down to Moshe from Hashem? And if not, why not? You know what I'm saying?
Well, one second. Hold on. Good question. Hold on. So what I'm trying to show you is that they were caught emotionally, intellectually, between a rock and a hard place. What's the rock and the hard place? The rock is there's no way Hashem is going to give us this land on a silver platter. We cannot accept that that's God's hashgacha. It can't be. What's the alternative? The alternative is we're going to have to go fight a war. We can't fight that war. We're frightened. There is no way we're going to fight that war. We can't do it. So now they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And now they're being sent to spy out the land, to go to the land. And for Moshe Rabbeinu, the idea of going out to the land was mostly really an idea of to see how good the land is, and come back and tell Bnei Yisrael, get them excited about Eretz Yisrael. But for them, at that moment that they become the 12 Meraglim, 10 of them, now they're thinking to themselves, how are we going to extricate ourselves from this rock and this hard place? How are we getting out of this? And they realize there's one way to get out of it. Yes, Ezra.
Didn't the Jewish people fight Amalek coming out of Egypt?
They did.
So how is that not any sort of preparation for war going to Israel? Even though it's
Good
many
question.
years later, but how is that not any sort of prep?
I don't think the story of Amalek, or I should say the event of Amalek, ultimately had much of an effect on them. Because Amalek was a small group of fighters. It did not involve the nation as a whole. And basically, if you follow the story of the Chumash, you just get the sense that this was an isolated thing, that that for that particular group that came to try to stop the whole effect of Yetziat Mitzrayim, so Hashem did a nes for that particular thing. But they cannot see that on any kind of a global scale. That they couldn't see. It's one thing you're coming out of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and you want to make sure that Yetziat Mitzrayim is not, that the whole effect of Yetziat Mitzrayim is not dashed at that point and ruined. So there's an isolated thing, and Moshe holds his hands up, and there's a nest. So that's a very, very specific thing. But to go ahead and say that a nation is going to go in as a nation and go ahead and conquer 7 different nations that hold an area, it's just not comparable. They didn't see it as a comparable thing.
They went to war there. They couldn't go to war one by one and fight and have the same type of miracles that have that foresight to see that, okay, that can happen too.
But first of all, that's not what's happening. First of all, it's not happening. It's I told you I'm going to Rashi, so it's Bo or Rashu. They're being told there's not going to be any kind of limited fight that they feel, okay, a limited fight maybe we could do. This is we are walking in and taking over the whole country, and then the alternative will be is that we're going to all act as an army, all of us, okay, and we're going to conquer the land that they didn't believe they could do. The fact that you see you could do some small thing doesn't mean that, in a particular circumstance, doesn't mean that you go to extrapolate from there and imagine, therefore we could do that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It was Am Yisrael's idea to send in the spies, right? And then they brought it to Moshe, then Moshe brought it to Moshe. Is that...
Yes.
So if it was their idea, how come they didn't tell them in the first place to? Was it their idea strategically to bring them for war or for good reasons?
That's a good question. I want to reserve going into that right now. That's I think that's like another class to understand what happened there. If we have time at the end, I'll be willing to try to take it up. It's a very, very good question. And there's problems looking between Tvarim and Bamidbar also. So I want to hold off on that. It's a good question, very good question. Okay. Is there another? Yeah?
Yeah. So Hashem took Israel out of Egypt on a silver platter, so why would they think you would do the same here? Why would it be different?
It's a good question.
Because there was more fighting in that spot, I would say.
You're the biggest empire in the world.
There's also a completely new generation. They've been dying out. So
What's the difference?
They didn't experience that.
It's other people, not the spies.
But it also wasn't completely a silver platter. They did get chased out with 600 chariots. It wasn't a war, but it was chases. They had to run out in the middle of the night.
So you kind of split into silver.
Yeah, but it's not.
It wasn't necessarily, yeah, you're right.
It's not a silver. It's a bronze platter. It's not a silver platter.
It wasn't a cake walk.
I would say the answer to that question is that the fact that the Jews were enslaved, and that was part of the Brit Bein HaBetarim between Hashem and Avraham, so they maintain that it was within the range of Chesed Hashem to take them out of there. That they could accept. They were enslaved in a most horrific way for over 200 years, for whatever reasons. Okay, it's another class. Why? But they were. So they maintained that that was appropriate and would fit into the framework of justice and chesed Hashem to take them out from that situation. But to simply take a nation and go to Eretz Yisrael with a group of nations that they have no beef with, and simply take this group and walk in, and they'll all run, that doesn't make sense. That they could not understand why the Chesed Hashem should be such a thing. The other case is where there is suffering and they're tortured and they're under, a very negative situation. Okay, so the Chesed Hashem is that Am Yisrael should survive. So then you can understand that the Nisim are a means to such a thing. But over here, what's the point? Doesn't seem to be the situation that should demand this kind of Chesed Hashem for their behalf. Doesn't seem so. Okay? Good question. So one second. So now lost my train of thought. So.
How are the spies going to get out of the situation?
Yeah. See, Rashi in understanding the Chet does not in any way try to play around with exactly what the Chet is. The Chet is Dibat Haaretz. Dibat Haaretz. Dibat Haaretz means that they spoke Lashon Hara, they told lies about the land, or exaggerated about the land. So what was the real Dibat Haaretz? It's not that there were powerful people there. That's exactly what their fear was, that there were powerful people there. What was the Dibat Haaretz? The Dibat Haaretz was Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha Hi. That this land, bad environment, bad air, people are dying all over the place. This is not where Jews want to retire. This is not the place. Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha Hi. In other words, what they did was being caught between that rock in a hard place, meaning knowing that God, they can't believe God would ever give them the land without any incident. Nor can they ever accept emotionally at this point to go ahead and fight the war. So there's only one thing to do at this point, to show why we shouldn't want Eretz Israel. That was their move. They've got to get themselves out of this whole problem. And there's only one way to get out of the problem. And it's classic. It's the way human beings get out of problems all the time. Blame somebody else. Blame something else. It's not about me. It's not about this. It's about that. That's the real problem here. And that's exactly what they did. They said, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha, V'zeh Piryah, and this is its fruit. And the fruit was strange, didn't look like normal fruit. They went ahead and they blamed Eretz Yisrael that it's not worthy. And by the way, I want you to understand something. Again, you have to always put yourself, in the shoes of the people in the Torah if you really, really want to understand what's going on in Torah. Think about it. And I know I do it, so I'm just like to think I'm normal, so I hope everyone else does it. You're going to go on vacation somewhere, or you're going to move somewhere, or you're buying something somewhere, a house, a condo, a townhome, whatever. Not only do you make what I call the rational plans, you start reading all the brochures, right? And you start conjuring in your mind, what it's going to be like there. In other words, what people do is not only involve themselves in the reality, but they create a whole fantasy. There's a fantasy. And often, or many times, and it can end up being very disappointing, that if the fantasy is what is moving them, That's going to be a great disappointment. Am Yisrael was gaining already the fantasy. The fantasy was going. We're going to go to this land that the one they promised our Avot 200, 300, 400 years ago. Moshe is talking about what a great land it is, how beautiful. They had like this whole vision. So when they come back and they say, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveahi, it's a land that eats up its inhabitants. It's strange, it's weird, the air quality isn't good, there's something real. This was such a busting of a balloon, such a terrible thing to do, but it was so well calculated. It's exactly the way to deal with it. It's exactly what they needed to do. And that's why it had such a powerful effect. It had a powerful effect. All the Bnei Israel shared probably the similar feelings of the Meraglim anyhow. But the big thing to them was, we're going to this Eretz Yisrael. And that's why they came back. And their calculation was, destroy that fantasy completely. Destroy it. You see? And that night, Bnei Israel, of course, the Bnei Israel, of course, cried. And they cried for the shattering of the fantasy, of what they had hoped for. And of course, what the alternative was at this point, they didn't know. But you can understand now what the Gemara means when it says it was a bechiyah shel chinam, a cry for nothing. It always bothers me when I hear expressions like that. What do you mean it was a cry for nothing? What do you mean? But the answer is, it really was a cry for nothing. God was handing them this land on a silver platter. This really was a cry for nothing. It was a complete cry for nothing. God was handing it to them on a silver platter. They didn't even have to do a war. They didn't have to make any effort. So the cry was completely for nothing. It was completely for nothing. And it was a loss of that fantasy, and at the same time, of course, with not understanding what their future will be. That was their cry.